Today we're doing a character build, and that character build is Dham Tanky, the Dhampir tank. So this build really came from the idea of using a Dhampir's Vampiric Bite as your main attack. And the main benefit of doing that is that we can take different ability scores, where usually a barbarian is going to have to take a bunch into strength. We can skip that and just go into the abilities that boost our defenses, being dexterity and constitution. Now we do sacrifice big damage die with our weapons to do that. We're using a d4 instead of potentially a d12. So hopefully we can get a lot out of this choice. So let's see if we can do that. So I'm going to start with some downsides. I'm not sure if this is rules as intended, but it is certainly rules as written. When we are using rage, it's only strength-based attacks that are going to get the plus rage damage to them. So our bite is not. On top of that, reckless attack cannot be done with anything besides strength attacks. So again, because we're using constitution, we can't use that. Now keep in mind that when reckless attack and rage were written, there was no such thing as a constitution attack. So that may not be intended, but it is as written. So I think there's a good chance your DM allows you to, but we're going to assume as written where we cannot. So those are two big things that we just lost out on about being a barbarian. So we're going to start off just not doing as much damage as our barbarian counterparts. But what do we get in return? Well, for that, let's go check out our ability scores. So this is kind of an interesting ability score setup. We're going to take +2, +1. We're going to put the +2 in Dex. We're going to put the +1 in Constitution. And here I'm using point buy. We're going to go ahead and maximize both our Constitution and Dexterity. So our Dexterity ends up at 17 and our Constitution ends up at 16. Now we're going to be able to put the remainder of our points, which we usually are putting into Strength, we can dump them into Wisdom. And then we can round out Strength at a 10. Now with that means we are stronger in wisdom saving throws, which barbarians are usually really weak at. We're still weak at them, but just less so, and it's really nice to kind of pad that weakness of ours. On top of that, we're going to start out with a solid 16 AC, and then we're going to put on a shield to get an 18 AC right out the gate. Now at level 4, you might assume that we're going to take a half feat at dexterity to round us out to 18, but it's actually a lot more important that we start maximizing our constitution. But there aren't really any great half feats for constitution, so we're going to just put 2 points in there until we get to 20, and then from there we'll do Piercer as our half feat to get our dexterity rounded out before finally putting our last ASIs into getting our dexterity maximized, and then we have 1 feat left over there at the end, which I would take tough just to get our HP to some absurd levels. So starting out with an 18 AC is going to be really high for barbarians, and we're also not using reckless attack, so our AC and hit points are both going to be really high. Combine that with the fact that our bite, once we're below half health, is going to heal us, and we're going to be raging. We still get the benefits of the defensive rage, so healing goes a further way for us. So we may not do as much damage as other barbarians, but we are tankier than other barbarians. But here's the thing about tanks. If we have a tank who is so resistant to taking damage and can just eat damage, it can just be ignored if it's not doing damage or if it's not incentivizing enemies to attack it. So we have to take a subclass that's either going to boost our damage output or is going to punish enemies for not attacking us. So there are different routes we can go here. Zealot Barbarian both increases our tankiness and our damage output. There's also the Storm Herald, who actually benefits from an increased constitution, which is pretty cool. I did like that synergy there, but I had to go Ancestral Guardian Barbarian. Not only is it my favorite barbarian, both mechanically and for its flavor, but I just think it fits too well. When we hit someone now, they either need to attack us or they're just super nerfed with their attacks. So it really shines with this playstyle. It forces people to hit us, which pushes us below half HP, which then gives us advantage and gives us a time to heal. It just works too well. I think it's amazing. I would say save our healing for when we're below half HP. We don't want to heal above half HP because then we're going to lose our advantage, but we want to stay in that half HP but not be scared of dying. Really, how we're going to do that is by having really high HP, because 1, it's easier to get into that threshold and not be afraid, and 2, have a really good AC, which we do. So just taking a snapshot, at 4th level, we're at 19 AC. At 8th level, we hit our 20 AC, and that kind of continues. Every time we hit an ASI, our AC increases, and eventually, once we hit level 20, it's going to increase by a lot because we get the Barbarian's Capstone feature, and we're going to end up with a lot of AC by the end of the game. 24 to be precise. And if you took my suggestion by taking the tough feat and maximizing your constitution, Once you hit level 20, we're also sitting at a monstrosity of 325 HP, which goes even further once we consider we have a bunch of rages to put into it. Now that goes even further when we consider that we're healing from our Vampiric Bite. Now how that healing works is it's based on the piercing damage we do. So there's a couple ways we can boost our piercing damage. Barbarians are naturally going to increase it whenever we get a crit with brutal critical. And we're really going to want to save our healing moments for those brutal criticals, because not only are we getting the extra normal dice from a crit, we're getting extra barbarian dice from brutal critical, and we're also getting extra piercer dice, which is the half feat we took to round out our dexterity to really increase the amount of healing we can get as a barbarian. So again, looking at this at its extreme, at level 20, on average, if we hit a crit, we're healing around 20 HP, but that's before we take into consideration that piercer is going to let us re-roll at least one of those ones we get. So the average is bumped up a little bit higher. And that 20 HP goes a lot further when you consider that we are raging, so it's likely doubled. And on top of that, it can be used like 6 times a rest. So that 20 HP becomes 120 HP. With rage, it can become 240 HP just of healing from our bites. That's a crazy amount. Again, these are the extremes, but just showing you where we can go here. Now, all this HP goes even further once you consider that we are Ancestral Guardians, and our 6th level feature allows us to use our reaction to reduce damage. And once we get to level 14, that reduced damage is also our damage output. So we can save our teammates as well as ourselves, then take that and do extra damage. So our damage output is kind of made up for in still a tanky way. Just a really cool synergy here. But speaking selfishly, we can use it on ourselves. So that HP, that crazy amount of HP I was talking about before, goes even further because we're reducing a significant amount of damage every turn. In other words, this character can be so hella tanky, it's actually insane. And it starts out strong tanky and only gets crazier. A couple of just extra little details. Because we dumped strength, we can put a lot more into dexterity, so our longbow attacks are actually pretty dang good, especially once we consider that we have piercer. So in those moments we need ranged options, we are better than any other barbarian at that. On top of that, we have increased mobility with spider climb, which, you know, as a melee character isn't going to come up as often as a ranged character, but it can still help us get into melee if someone's on high ground, for example. And it helps us do things out of combat. We can be kind of more of an infiltrator by climbing up walls and trying to sneak into buildings that way. Overall, I think the Dham Tank is actually a really cool and interesting build that's pretty unique, has some cool twists to it, and I'm a big fan of it. But I would like to know if you are. Let me know in the comments down below. What would you do differently? What would you do to make it better? We do all sorts of flavor builds. If you want to check out some more of them, check out this playlist here. We are D&D Daily. We're releasing new D&D content every single day. If you love D&D, this is your spot. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one. Later.